Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Dan and Joe Sports Show. As always, I'm Dan.
I'm Joe.
All right, Joe, we're previewing our teams 19 through 15 this week. You and I are staying loyal to the CBS Sports poll. I know they released the AP and the coaches poll, but that's just going to mess with our mojo right now to go off that. So we're going to stick with the old on this. After all, we know the coaches know nothing about these teams. They have people in their SI department are the ones who are picking these things. It's not like you actually have the coaches looking through and making these selections. That's the worst poll. The AP poll was all right, but I feel just as good using the CBS Sports poll.
Right.
All right, Joe. In number 19, and to me, this seems like an extreme overreach to have them ranked this high. You have the Miami Hurricanes at number 19 in first year of Mario Cristobal's reign. Um, Joe, until I see Miami actually do something, I don't feel comfortable having them ranked in the top 25 at all.
I'm fine with them in the top 25. Now, I'm a little bit surprised, maybe 19. I think that if I were to rank them, I would put them in that kind of fringe, like 24, 25 basis. But I do think there's some talent returning, and I do think that bringing him to Miami is going to energize the program.
That's right. I thought that Mario Cristobal was a great hire for Miami. Obviously, the man knows how to recruit. We've seen that at Oregon. Of course, he's got the Nick Saban lineage when it comes to recruiting, and more importantly, the guy's from Miami. He coached at Florida International, did a really good job there, and I think this is going to be just an excellent hire. He's not the best in-game coach, but in terms of building a foundation, he is really good at building programs. And we saw it last year with Kirby Smart. Kirby Smart might be one of the worst in-game coaches I've ever seen, but the man knows how to build something, and he won a national championship. So Mario Cristobal is going to have untapped resources. He can recruit every player he would ever need within 20 miles of his campus, and I think it should be a good fit. Now he does have a returning quarterback coming in Van Dyke, who was really good the last 6 or 7 games of the season when he started for Miami. Um, I think Tyler Van Dyke was one of the more accurate quarterbacks in the nation at that point. Miami's gotten some good transfers out of the portal, and I think that one thing we know about Cristobal, they usually have good defenses, good offensive line play, and so I definitely think that this was a solid hire, and they're going to be on the uptick. The question I have is, of course, how long it's going to take.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's a legitimate question. You wonder, is this going to be a 2 or 3 year plan, or are you going to see, instant success? And we've seen examples, recent history of like the Scott Frost at Nebraska, where you think it's going to work out real quick, and it takes time, or it doesn't work out that well. And so we can't just assume, but I do feel like there's definitely that momentum now.
I think so too, Joe. And one thing we know about Miami is that it can be one of the best programs in America. They've got what, 6 national championships. They owned the '80s, early '90s, and then the early 2000s. And it's now we're looking at been about 20 years since Miami was really relevant, but people still remember the U. It's got its own kind of swag to it, its own kind of style, and there's no place really like it. And so I think that it was the perfect hire, and I think he's going to get him there. And what we need to see, Joe, I think it's going to be really important looking at their early schedule. There's a game in the third week of the season that I think is going to tell us a lot about how far Miami is from getting back at the top of the ACC, or maybe even being a team that's nationally relevant, a fringe playoff contender. And that's when they go to College Station to take on Texas A&M. Texas A&M, I think the preseason number 5 team in most polls. Of course, A&M is the hype machine right now with their greatest recruiting class of all time coming in, and it's going to be a really difficult environment. And what we've seen lately from Miami is when they take on SEC teams, especially in opening kind of games, it's been really bad for them. I mean, that game against Alabama last year, I think both of us thought that Miami was really going to hang with them because, of course, they had a returning quarterback. They seemed like things were really moving forward for them, And we really thought that at that point that, it was still going to work out for, the former Mississippi State defensive coordinator as their coach. And of course it didn't. And they just got blasted by an Alabama team that, while they were really good, not one of the better Alabama teams. So I'm really fascinated to see how they do in this experience. One thing I'll say about Texas A&M, they're not always the best at destroying these out of conference teams. I mean, think about last season; they really had to struggle to beat a bad Colorado team. This would be a huge opportunity for Miami to go in there, and if they got a win, it would be seismic. But I think that a win is for them to stay within 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, I think so too. That's how you're evaluating it, not so much, if they win the game. Kind of feel like it's house money for them, whereas A&M, with them, trying to actually prove it this year and show us something, they got to win this game, and the pressure will definitely be on them and not so much on Miami. For Miami, I think it's kind of a free shot.
Exactly. I mean, I would say if this was Oregon taking on Texas A&M in Aggie land, I would say Cristobal would want to win this game, and it would be a statement piece for Oregon. But with him coming in, having to get everybody up to speed in the first season, I think this is more of a litmus test to see how well did you compete, were you competitive.
Right, I would concur.
So we'll see, Joe. If Miami can go out there, maybe they lose a game, something like 31-17. I would say that's a good sign for the U coming back.
Yeah.
All right, Joe. Moving on to our number 18 team. This is a team who everybody kind of thought was going to be back last season, myself included, when I saw them with my own eyes, and that's Penn State. This is, I said I thought Miami was overranked. I'm kind of shocked to see Penn State sitting here at 18. They returned Sean Clifford. They just signed James Franklin to a huge new deal. Speaking of Miami earlier, we were talking about how Manny Diaz got fired. Well, Manny Diaz is the new defensive coordinator at Penn State. So, I mean, this is a team that, in my eyes, should be a top 10 team. I think there's a lot of expectations. They had a season last year where they started out hot. They beat Auburn in what was a great game and a great environment, College Game Day, that I was at last year. And then everything, despite all the complaints about Sean Clifford, turns out he was quite important to that team, because as soon as he got hurt, their fortunes changed and they ended up dropping 5 games last year. But still, I would venture to say that they were by far the best 8-5 team in America.
Yeah, I think that what's happened is a lot of pollsters saw, their slide at the end of the season and kind of looked at it without the caveat that Clifford, was injured, and that was kind of a knee-jerk reaction to kind of have them as almost a forgotten team, where they're kind of lost in the shuffle with this poll. Because I think you're right. I mean, it's really hard to think about, 17 other teams being better than Penn State, and so it definitely seems like they got a poor ranking here.
That's right, Joe. And we'll get to see within the first 3 weeks whether maybe this 18th ranking is correct, or they're like more like what you and I think should be a top 10 team when they travel to Auburn. Of course, Auburn is just being bullied by all the prognosticators this year. Have them ranked as the worst team in the SEC West. You can say what you want. If you're a Big Ten program that's never gone and played at Jordan Hare, that is going to be a lit environment. I'm going to be going with friend of the show, Kyle. We're going to this game. I can say the tickets were quite expensive. It's a sellout. The Orange and Blue Nation is going to be really excited for this one. Don't know whether it's going to be a game day game or not, like it was last season, but I will say that it's going to be maybe the most intense road environment that Penn State fans have been to in a non-conference game since they went to Alabama one of the first seasons that Saban was there. So this will tell you a lot about where Penn State is. Sean Clifford played excellent last year at home, but how's it going to do in a road environment? Penn State last year, their biggest problem was their lack of a running game. I've heard they have a young running back now who a lot of people are saying, and probably what they say every time there's a good running back at Penn State, he's the next Saquon Barkley. We'll see if that's true or not. Of course, they're missing out on a lot of their talent from last year. The amazing wide receiver they had last year, he went into the pros. So I think that from a defensive standpoint, they're going to be great. Sean Clifford, is a very underrated quarterback in my mind. He doesn't make a lot of mistakes. He's very consistent and he can win games for you. I thought he played great against Auburn last year. So I think this game will tell us a lot about Penn State right off the gate.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a huge test for him. And I feel like Clifford's been there a while. Did he succeed Trace McSorley? Has he been there that long?
He is a 6th-year senior, I believe. He's a super duper senior.
Yeah, so I mean, he's been there a while because I can remember McSorley playing there like as recent as 2018, and so he's been the starter. I feel like in that entire time span, like you said, been with the team even longer than that. And so, yeah, I mean, his experience and talent goes a long way to boosting this team's potential. But also, you make a good point about the running back outlook for Penn State. I do feel like, while this particular running back, a lot of talent, you do see a lot of prognosticators always kind of quick to make that Saquon Barkley comparison. I feel like Miles Sanders a couple of years ago kind of unfairly got on that level too. He wasn't as good. He was good, but
It was good.
always hard to live up to that compliment. And so I'm going to be interested to see how Penn State looks in this road environment. And then, a good opportunity for Auburn to get that, early season upset as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think this game is going to be monumental. Like last season, I thought it was a game that was a neat experience. I went into it with no expectations. I thought Penn State was a better team than us. I was, just wanting to see a good game, and that's what I saw. This is a different situation. I feel like this is a game that Penn State needs to be a top 10 team, to be a real playoff competitor. Auburn needs it to have a good season because if you want to say you're back, if you want to draw recruits in, this is a game you have to win. You're going to have your fan base more up than you've had them probably in the first 2 years that you were at Auburn. It's going to be a huge deal, and it's going to be a marquee opponent in a helmet that you've never seen at Jordan Hare Stadium. I mean, I remember getting to see Penn State there was so cool, but it's always really a neat experience when you get one of those out of conference opponents in your home that you get to see. That's just very different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's just going to be a great game, and then I like it when you have these types of games on campus and not just in those neutral sites.
Absolutely. It makes all the difference in the world, Joe. I mean, getting to go to Happy Valley last year, if it had been like at the Steelers Stadium or something like that, it would not have been the same experience.
I can see that.
Yeah. So we'll see. That'll definitely tell us a lot about Penn State. Sticking in the Midwest, Joe, Cincinnati is our number 17 team. And of course, Cincinnati's coming off being the bracket buster, if you will, being the first group of 5 team to ever make the college football playoff last year. And, I'm interested to see, thinking about the way they played in that game against Alabama, did they destroy all chances for a group of 5 teams? Or was it one of those things where they were like, well, you played Alabama and it wasn't terrible? But here's a chance, I think, for them to, really come out and show us what they're made of in the very first week, Joe, because they didn't play very competitively against Alabama. They looked kind of bad. And I don't think Alabama played one of their best games. But Cincinnati, right off the shoot, gets what this year is probably an upper level SEC team. They're at least in the middle, and they get to take on Arkansas right off the bat with KJ Jefferson and company. And of course, Yessirr at head coach. And I think this is a great opportunity for Cincinnati, who actually had 9 players get drafted last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they lost a lot of talent to the NFL. You think about Desmond Ridder, a lot of good defensive players at corner. They also had a wide receiver. Yep. And they also had a wide receiver, I think, was drafted by the Colts as well. So there's a lot of talent from that team that's at the next level. So I think that when I look at their ranking, I'm surprised they're ranked this high with the exodus of all that talent. I do think that a lot of this ranking is kind of respect for what they did last year, which makes sense to me, giving them the benefit of the doubt. But then I see, on a contradictory level, if I'm not mistaken, Ole Miss is not ranked in the top 25 on this poll. And so I was really, if we're going to be obviously biased on the show, I was very perturbed by the fact that Ole Miss coming off, a 10-3 season, bringing in a lot of impact transfers, great offensive line, dumbfounded that they're not at least in the top 25 in this poll. And so with that kind of discrediting Cincinnati's ranking. Just get kind of surprised to see Cincinnati this high, but they have the opportunity to prove it, and it will of course start with Arkansas.
And Joe, what I love is this is probably one of the most underrated games in week one. It's probably one of the ones I'm more excited about than anything because I feel like this would be a huge statement game for Cincinnati. It'd be like, yes, we didn't beat Alabama last year when we got in the playoffs, but remember, we did beat Notre Dame. And now you see that first week of the season, after losing Desmond Ritter, after losing Ford at running back, after losing all these excellent players, we went out and we beat Arkansas. So this is a huge opportunity, I think, for Luke Fickell to show that his program has some staying power.
Yeah, no, it really is. I think that they've got to win a game like this. They're going to stay, in the national conscience. And, I enjoyed the Cincinnati story last year. A lot of people, are kind of maybe Cincinnati haters, but I really enjoyed seeing a team like that kind of burst, break through and make it to the playoff from a group of five conference. But on the Arkansas side, Dan, I'm interested, to see how they look in this game too.
That's right, Joe. And what a coincidence. Our number 16 team is Arkansas. So this really works out well. And what game is important for Arkansas? It's that Cincinnati game. You think about last year, Joe, Arkansas burst out in the beginning of the season after having, I would say, a better than expected first season under Sam Pittman. But, Texas was getting all their hype with Coach Sark and with their offense. And I think Arkansas was like a 13.5 point underdog going to Texas, and they destroyed Texas. And that was when Arkansas kind of made their mark. And suddenly Arkansas gets all the way being in a top 10 team, goes into Athens in an 11 a.m. game, and in probably one of the more lit atmospheres I've ever seen in an 11 a.m. game, Georgia just wiped the floor with them and really showed how much better Georgia was than everyone else. And then Arkansas went out and they got smacked down by Auburn a couple weeks later, and they didn't really get it back. But one thing I will say for Sam Pittman's crew is they finished the season really well by beating a Penn State team who I thought they had no business even being on the same field with. So Arkansas, they kind of righted the ship a little bit. They had some tough losses. Of course, that game against Ole Miss last year was some kind of amazing affair right there. That surprisingly, Ole Miss actually came out on top in. Usually, they lose to Arkansas. That's like one of those teams that has always been a thorn in their side. But this will be an opportunity for Arkansas to show that people should take them seriously this year because, right now you're looking at an SEC right now that Alabama and Georgia are sitting there, foreseeably miles ahead of everyone else, and maybe A&M's in there. But then after that, maybe even in that third position, I would say 3 through 14 in the SEC, outside of maybe Vanderbilt and South Carolina, you could kind of see anybody climbing the ladder in that area. And if Arkansas can go out and win this game, maybe they have that chance to be that third best team in the SEC.
Yeah, it feels like it's anybody's game. And with Arkansas, KJ Jefferson, I would put him probably as top 3 returning quarterbacks in the SEC, like outside of Young, obviously, and maybe Hooker at Tennessee. And I could even make an argument maybe that he's better than Hooker to some extent. I think that the test for Jefferson this year will be how good does he look with the departure of Treylon Burks, who's now with the Titans. That's a big loss. Losing a first-round wide receiver is that security blanket and an explosive playmaker. But, Arkansas always has a good offensive line. Sam Pittman's just done better, I think, than anybody would have imagined with that program. It was a hire that I joked about at the time, but he's always been a good recruiter. Was a good recruiter when he was at Georgia, obviously. And I think that he's really got this program in a stable position. And I look for them to have a good chance, to open the season with a good win.
I think so too, Joe. One player to watch for Arkansas this year, of course, you mentioned they lost Treylon Burks. They got Jaden Hazelwood from Oklahoma, the transfer wide receiver, is now going to be playing at Arkansas. He's got a chance to immediately become their go-to guy, and he's a guy that's got a lot of talent.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely.
So we'll see. KJ Jefferson, in my mind, a very good runner, a very tough runner. I want to see him be a better passer, though. I got to put Hooker at number 2 above him right now because I think Hooker is more of a complete quarterback at the time. But if KJ Jefferson can improve his passing ability to go with what he already has in the running department, he is quite a dynamic quarterback.
Yeah, yeah, and then and outside of the SEC, like it's hard to think of too many quarterbacks better than him. Maybe like a Sam Hartman or a C.J. Stroud or a Caleb Williams, but I think he's a top 10. I would venture to put him maybe as a top 10 national quarterback.
Yeah, I think that's fair, Joe. I think he is. He's definitely at least a fringe top 10 quarterback. And this is a great chance for Arkansas, a team that has more hype than they've had probably since the days of Bobby Petrino right now. And they get a chance week one to show us that they deserve to be mentioned as among the upper echelon teams of the SEC when they take on Cincinnati.
Yes, yes, and unlike last year, this year they're the team that everybody knows about. They're on our radar. They're not going to be able to sneak up like they were able to last year.
That's right. They're not going to come out of the gate with Yessirr becoming something of a joke because no one even knew what it was. Everybody knows that this year you can put a dime in the jukebox for old Sam Pittman.
That's right.
All right, Joe. Moving on to number 15. Here's a team that I expect to see in this area, maybe a little bit higher, but who's coming off a really disappointing season, and that's Wisconsin. Um, a couple years ago, there was a time when I thought Wisconsin was maybe one of the top 3 or 4 best teams in America. They had such a good running back with Taylor. Their defense looked so great. And it just seems like, I'm not saying that Wisconsin needs to fire their coach, but I feel like they've lost a little bit momentum the last couple years. And it seemed like they were moving so good for so long. And now, they got a lot to prove this season. Um, you know, they're always in my mind one of those teams that is among the top 4 or 5 best teams in the Big Ten year in, year out. Of course, they were when it was situation that their side of the division, the Big Ten, always seemed to work out where they could win it every year. And they could always be in the Big Ten championship game. And this is a year where they need to come back and have a season like that because last year they lost, I think, 6 games, and it was really just a very upsetting year for them. Well, Joe, their big opportunity they have is they get to take on Ohio State at the Horseshoe September 24th. And what we need to see is Graham Mertz finally going to come out and be the quarterback that we thought he was. I feel like you had all these quarterbacks that came out 4 years ago where they were guys that everybody thought was going to be the greatest freshman ever. Bo Nix, Graham Mertz, Sam Howell, and all of them have really not kind of lived up to what we thought they would be. And Mertz is the one who, like, his first game ever, Bo Nix threw that amazing touchdown pass on that good second half against Oregon, but Mertz came out and put up like 63 points against Illinois in his first game and looked unreal. And ever since then, he's just been a turnover machine and probably ended up being the worst out of all the hype freshmen that we have. Let me add Jaden Daniels to that list too. He's another one that I think never really lived up to what we thought he would be 4 years ago, and now he's transferred to LSU. But Mertz has always been the one that shocked me the most because I feel like with Wisconsin, you always have good offensive line play. You have really good tight ends. You also have that safety blanket of an amazing running back every single year, whether it be, Jonathan Taylor, who have you. And he just really hasn't got it together. But he gets a chance 4th week of the season to show whether Wisconsin's for real or not, if they can maybe spring a massive upset against Ohio State.
That's right, Dan. And when I look at Wisconsin, I share your assessment that this is a program that's lost some momentum the last year. They've got to get it back. And I think it starts with last year. I just didn't really feel like they had that household sturdy running back that they've had most years. You don't have the Jonathan Taylor or the Monte Ball, different players they've had every
Ron
year.
Dane.
Yes, they've just been, record-setting running backs. And I think that having that missing component, and I don't know who that's going to be this year, because I feel like what's odd about our, discussion of Mertz is most years you don't even really think of who the quarterback is at Wisconsin. I feel like that's almost a bad sign for them that we know their quarterback but not their running back.
Agreed, Joe. I mean, some of Wisconsin's best teams, I couldn't tell you who their quarterback was because of their ground and pound defense, offensive line, use your tight end style. The quarterback's kind of an also ran player.
Exactly. So, I mean, this is going to be a big year for them to try to, reemerge.
And Joe, this would be one that I think that, they haven't talked about it a lot, but I feel like if their head coach doesn't go out and win 9 or 10 games this year, he's got to be on the hot seat because this has been too many years now in my mind since Wisconsin has been relevant. And they've had so much hype in the very beginning of seasons, a couple of years, they've completely fallen off the rails. That I'd be a little bit worried if they didn't get to that 8, 9, 10 win range this year.
Well, they're like one of the best teams you can think of that just can't seem to quite make the playoff or a national championship game. Like they'll always kind of start, they'll be highly ranked, and they always seem to finish like 10-2 or something.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I would venture to say, Joe, that they're maybe the best program out there that has the most consistent program out there that hasn't made the college football playoff. I would put them
I
in
think
that
you're
top
right.
five list. I mean, what? I mean, the teams I could think of that will be on that list, maybe Wisconsin, Penn State, Auburn. Uh, you know, these would be the ones that I'm thinking of that have been like, kind of like right there, and that you always think of as being really good programs, but just haven't made the college football playoff yet.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it just seems like they just can't, get through that hurdle. And even in the BCS era, they had years where they had great teams. Like Russell Wilson's team was probably good enough to make it to the BCS championship game. That they just have never been able to break through.
Joe, the year they lost to TCU in that epic Rose Bowl, I thought that was the best team in America, that Wisconsin team. I didn't think that TCU had a chance to even hang with them in that game.
Yeah, that was a good team.
So yeah, that's one that just never really has gotten over the edge. They never got over the edge with Barry Alvarez. They got a lot better. Never with the guy who ended up coaching in Arkansas for a long time. And it seems like they started off kind of hot with this coach's era now, but it really has slowed down. So it's a big season for them. And, they don't need to go out and beat Ohio State. Of course, that would be a great upset. But I do think they need to go out and this Ohio State team right now that them and Alabama are being considered by far number one and number two this year. Wisconsin needs to go out there and be competitive and show that they're a team that is, worthy of a New Year's Six bowl. That's what this game needs to be for them because I think, I'm not expecting this Wisconsin team to make the college football playoff, but I do think they should be a team that I see in a New Year's Six bowl game. So this is your opportunity to go out there and hang with Ohio State.
Yeah, I mean it's got to be a good game. You don't want to allow Stroud and company to just hang just like a crooked number where it's like 49-14 or something.
That's right, Joe. And it'll be important for Wisconsin for us to see that they got that tough Badger defense. I mean, that's the first thing that you always think of with Wisconsin is you're not going to beat them by 30 points. You're not going to put up a 40-point score. If you beat them like 20-17.
Mm-hmm.
And so we will find out whether they got that kind of DNA in them or if maybe their coach might be looking for a new job next offseason.
Yep, that's true.
All right. And we'll be looking for the teams from number 14 to 10 next week. Hopefully, you'll join us. And looking forward to talking a little bit more college football. You can listen to all of our episodes on Spotify. Look up the Dan and Joe Sports Show on Spotify. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel and see all of our latest videos on there. And of course, you can also follow us on Twitter at DJ Sports Show and like our Facebook fan page. And as always, I'm Dan.
And I'm Joe.